First question to everyone in this little mini series of interviews is how did you get into classical music and why this particular instrument that you are playing now?
Well, I come from a family of musicians. So my mother is a violinist and played with the Atlanta Opera for many decades and subbed with the symphony and had a professional string quartet for a really long time. And my dad is a music educator, so he was a band director at first, and then he switched to orchestra because orchestra, there's no marching band, having to sweat out in the heat in the middle of Georgia. And I think he was more interested in kind of the orchestral side of like music education, but he's also a percussionist. So, me and my sister as children were dragged to rehearsals everywhere. So instead of having a babysitter, it was like, well, mom and dad have a rehearsal tonight, so we're going to the rehearsal. And one of my like earliest memories, just in general, but especially with music, is going to a dress rehearsal for Turandot at the Fox Theater, where the Atlanta Opera was performing at the time, which the Atlanta Opera, they're amazing, and the Fox Theater is such a magical place if you've ever been there.
Yeah, conducted there,
yes, and it's just, the sparkling stars on the ceiling, and it's so like magical anyway. And, I think I was like 4 or 5 years old, and the curtains open, and I see heads on spikes, and I was like, like classical music and opera is like, it's really metal, it's really cool, and I think a lot of people think that classical music is boring, but it's really not. I think, well, anyway, that's a whole nother conversation, but yeah, so that's probably, really what got me into it. And, I grew up being in rehearsals and hearing, string quartet rehearsals every Saturday, and it was really like the background of my life. It was always playing. It was, we were listening to it in the car, or they were practicing at home, and my sister and I were both in music lessons. So I took piano for like 5 years and did not practice as much as I should have. Really wish I had stuck with that instrument. But
I've heard that story before.
Yeah, it's really like it would have been very helpful, especially like going to music school and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think I really fell in love with the violin because I was exposed to it so much.
So your dad was not pushing for the percussion or trumpet?
I don't think he had a whole lot of say in the matter. Okay. So I think it was very much like like if you want to play an instrument, like here's a violin, and it's a great instrument to start young children on because it is small, it is affordable, it is difficult to break sometimes. And my sister played viola, but she started on violin, and it was just kind of something that we did. And it's great because I have a 4-year-old that I just started on violin. So, it's kind of coming full circle now, and he's very excited and enthusiastic about it, which is just so cool.
So any chamber music playing going on in the family?
Yeah, well, some. There was some, I think when you have parents who are musicians, it can be a little polarizing for the children, right? So like you either take to it very well and you're like, yes, I want to do this, I want to practice all the time, and you're like immersed in it, or it's like, you're essentially like dragging them to the practice room and saying you have to practice for however long, and I think my sister and I were kind of on different ends of that. So I really loved to practice and play, sometimes not all the time. And so I think for her, maybe she doesn't play anymore. So, but it was something that, we did together. We went to lessons together. And we did do a little bit of chamber music, but not quite so much as a family. So, yeah. That's all I'll say about that. But I think that's why I really took to the violin. Is I just grew up hearing it. Especially string quartet literature. I grew up listening to Shostakovich string quartets and Beethoven string quartets, and hearing them rehearsed, not only performed but rehearsed, and the arguing and the fighting that surrounded the rehearsal. Like a string quartet is pretty much like a marriage between 4 people. So
it's fascinating. A rehearsal like that, yeah.
Yeah. So there's there's a really interesting dynamic there, and I think also having parents who are musicians, I knew what I was getting into. I think a lot of young people get into music thinking it's going to be this incredibly glamorous, thing 100% of the time, when in reality it can be kind of lonely, kind of isolating, and there's a lot of times where it is not glamorous, and you work really, really long hours and really early mornings, and you have to really, really want to do it in order to do it, So I kind of knew what I was getting into, but I was lucky to have parents who supported my decision, So, yeah.
Next question is about your job with the HSO.
Yes.
How and when did you get to first play with this orchestra, and whether you remember the very first show you played here?
I do.
You do?
So I moved to Alabama in the fall of 2015, and in the spring of 2016, I played as a sub. And now I'm struggling to remember the name of the piece, but I can remember that there were some tricky sections. I can remember there were like some 16th triplets that I remember practicing quite a lot. And I remember I sat with someone who was really, really kind. He was another sub named Joe Ortiguera, who's a good friend of mine now. And he has a really big personality and immediately made me feel comfortable and relaxed. And it was a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed, the level of the orchestra, and it was a great gig. I live in Florence, which is about an hour and a half west of here. So it's kind of like the closest orchestra for me to play with. And then I actually forgot when I auditioned, but I think I auditioned later that year, maybe. I don't know. It all kind of blends together, in a way. But yeah, so I've been playing with the orchestra for like 10 years at this point, almost. Yeah. Probably pretty close to 10 years. So.
Any other ongoing gigs outside of the Huntsville Symphony?
Yes. So I teach at a University of North Alabama. We call it UNA. It's about an hour and a half west of Huntsville. In Florence,
the other direction.
The other direction, yes. In Florence, Alabama, which most people don't know where Florence is, but it's the most northwest corner of Alabama. And it is just north of Muscle Shoals, Alabama, which most people know about Muscle Shoals, the recording industry there. There's like 20 recording studios there. So I do a lot of studio work there. And then I also teach at the university. So I teach violin and viola this semester, which is a journey.
How many students you have?
So I have 6 students. And I also teach music history, chamber music, and play in the orchestra there. So we have it's kind of like a community and student and faculty orchestra called the Volz Symphony, and we all the faculty play in it for the most part, and you get to play alongside your students and other professionals, and yeah, we have a lot of fun. It's a fun gig. So yeah. Cool. Yeah.
So you also drive a lot, right?
I do. I actually
From home
spend
to here.
Yes,
Yeah.
and actually this week, everybody thinks that I'm kind of crazy. I was talking to the other professionals, but I commute for these too. So I drive home after the 10 o'clock rehearsal, and I drive here and get here at 8:30 in the morning. So, but it's okay because my kids wake up at 4 in the morning, so they're my little alarm clocks. But it's a way for me to see my children, at least once a day.
And also just sleep in your own bed, right?
Yes, rather than sitting in a
comfort.
hotel and I'm like, oh, I wish I was home, and like, what was that sound? What's that smell? So yeah, I just have trouble. I have trouble relaxing in a hotel, so.
Since you teach also, let's talk a little bit about maybe on a philosophical level or just a general level about the future of classical music, or rather the present of classical music.
Yes.
Based on your teaching experience, based on your experience as a musician, as a practicing musician, someone who's doing this as for a living or as the main thing you do in your life. What do you see since you started? How, if it has changed, and where is it going, and how do you see the future? You see a future, or you don't
Absolutely.
see the end of the tunnel?
Absolutely. I do see a future for classical
Okay.
music. It is a different one than I envisioned as a young person, who went to concerts. I imagined that the future would be very different than it is now, but I think it's evolving in a really exciting way. I think what's really important is that we as musicians and as music directors and as symphony musicians find ways to communicate with our audience. And in order to do that, we have to really understand our audience very well. And, I'm from Atlanta, and it's a very different audience that you have in Atlanta versus Huntsville versus a small town like Florence, Alabama. And so programming becomes very important. Having events before and after to explain and help listeners comprehend what they're going to hear, or help them kind of interpret it so that they understand. There's just, let's see, there is no nice way to say this, but there's just a lack of a lack of comprehensive musical education for most people. My parents, it was very important for them to give us a good music education because it was important for them. But without that, I don't know that I would have developed that interest in the same way. So I think connecting and making sure that our audiences are invested in what we're doing, that they're interested in what they're doing, and not like, hey, this is the music and you have to understand all of this up here or you're stupid, So
Do you think it's the same problem though with other performing arts, or is it specific to music or specific to classical music, like a theater or I don't know, musical is probably different, but maybe opera is comparable to what we are doing in symphony business. That lack of knowledge or the need for preparation, or feeling like I need to prepare. And although if I remember your story with the heads on the stakes,
I mean, it's hard to not love Puccini. You know what I mean? I feel like I don't know. It's difficult for me to necessarily speak to the other arts mediums because I'm really uneducated in those, if I'm being totally transparent. But I think maybe with opera, especially with contemporary opera and maybe operas that aren't Puccini or Mozart, maybe they do have those difficulties. But wait, what was the question? Sorry.
Well, the other part of the question is about education and
education.
what and how you see your own students.
Yes. So I will say that I had no idea who Lindsay Sterling was. Do you know who Lindsay Sterling is?
No.
All right.
Who is Lindsay Sterling?
So Lindsay Sterling is a violinist who is also like an acrobat, and does both while she performs. And does the whole amplified thing, and she makes more money in one show than I will probably make in my entire life. But
you don't have to hang upside down.
Well, yeah,
do that,
right? That's true. I mean, the bright side of things. But so I mean, I think that some students who get exposed to music in that way, sometimes that excites them, and they're like, "Oh, that's really cool! Like maybe that's an instrument they've never seen before," and that causes them to want to start playing, and then they explore the good rep that we have. That's not Lindsay Sterling, and I think. Before, kind of being very serious about classical music, it's easy to snub that stuff because you think, oh, that's really boring and, not at all what I'm interested or what drew me to the instrument. But I think it's important that we keep an open mind and really try to meet people where they're at, students, audience members, and try to develop their sense of taste and develop their sense of what music can be and what is possible. Because I think it's hard to just jump into something like Hindemith if you have no experience with classical music.
But you're optimistic if you think of your students, your own students.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes. Optimistic from the student perspective, from the audience perspective. I meet people all the time that this is the first time I've been to a classical music concert and I was so excited. I think it's also great to incorporate other, art mediums like we do with the kids' concerts, right? Like having a visual element for them to look at so they're not, just staring around like, okay, now what am I doing? I've done this for 5 minutes, that, and sometimes that works for adult audiences too,
absolutely.
So I think just kind of branching out and reimagining what symphonic concerts can be, what music can be, instead of just like you go and you wear the tux and you sit quietly and you're afraid to clap. I think that part of classical music is probably not going to continue, at least in this area. That's kind of my thought.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's a mixed bag because audience is not a monolith, unit of people ready to behave the same way. They're not coming from the same background. So you have to cater to all segments of your audience, and that's not easy. We were talking earlier about Pop's concerts and how music that's not classical divides the audience, because you have your own favorites from the times when you were a teenager.
Right.
What's your favorite non-classical
My
music?
favorite non-classical music? Like that I listened to as a teenager or that I listen to now?
Well, both, maybe both.
Okay, so when I was in high school, I really liked like 90s grunge, like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, that kind of thing. I think just because I just really liked, I don't know, it just seemed like a really intense experience.
So would you buy a ticket to a Nirvana cover band?
Oh yeah,
concert?
Absolutely. Like to relive my childhood, absolutely. I think I try to do as many things as I can to relate to the person that I was back then. But you know, now especially living where I live, there's a ton of singer-songwriters, and I've played on their albums or I've performed with them. So I've actually gotten into more like singer-songwriters and like
So you're a mom, you're an orchestra musician, you teach at a university.
Yeah.
If you ever have some time off, what do you do for fun?
That's really funny. I love to garden.
Okay.
I love to cook. I really, really love to cook. It's actually something I really, really enjoy, but I hate using a recipe. I feel like it stifles my creativity. So I'm a terrible baker because I don't like to measure things.
Did you learn to cook from your mom?
Actually, my dad.
Your
so
dad. Okay.
I hope my parents don't watch this, but
I'm sure they will.
But my dad is an amazing cook and was really like the main cook in our house, and he used to just create the most amazing things. When you have two parents who are musicians and educators, like, there are some thin times, especially, when we were younger, and, my dad was just always able to make things very special. I remember, we would have like the same pot of soup or something for like the whole week, but there would be like candles on the table and it'd be like very special and cool. But yeah, I really love to cook and hang out with my kids. I love hanging out with my kids. It makes me feel like a kid again, and to kind of like see life and hear music and experience all these things with them for the first time. And it just, it makes me remember all those things too, like the heads on spikes, so.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.